The Texas Board of Law Examiners, one of those rules is that, well, I'll just paraphrase it. It kind of goes like this. We shall never let anyone who's ever gone to law school online ever practice law in the state of Texas under any circumstances. So what happened was, when I applied for a Texas bar card in 2021, I went through about a 90-day process of providing tons of paperwork and proof of quality of education and clear moral character and all of that. And they very quickly, in a hearing with me in, I think it was April of 2021, rejected me outright and said essentially, actually, they cut off my microphone when I pointed out that they thought that Purdue University, Purdue Global, they thought it wasn't accredited, and it was, and they were making a very serious effort in that assumption. So I attempted to point that out, and they said, you know, we don't really want to hear from you anymore because you have an online education, and we're not going to let you in. I'm paraphrasing, but that's it.
Welcome to today's episode of Heart of the Hustle. I am here with Nelson Locke, and we're here to talk about virtual education and whether or not it is okay for law school. And he's got some really interesting stories around his experience with that. And so excited to have you here.
Well, thank you, Sherry. I've known you now for quite a few years, and actually we've worked together in a marketing capacity since 2022 when I first caused this issue to emerge, and you helped me with Virtual Education is Real Education, which is our site on Instagram.
Yeah, and we're both really passionate about virtual education, and we'll talk about this more later because we've both gotten advanced degrees through hybrid models of education. Before it was cool, right? During COVID, it became, cool and everybody does it now, but it was untested before that, right?
Well,
so we've both gone through it.
much more than you when you think about it, because when I went to Purdue Global Law School and enrolled as a 1L law student in 2005. The school was only 10 years old, and it was just an amazing experience to learn how that worked as compared to sitting in a classroom.
Yeah. All right, so tell us a little bit about you, how you became an attorney, and what did you do before that? Because I suspect there was some life before 2005.
Yeah, and I guess when I tell you and our listeners some of these numbers of years, you're going to think I'm 100 years old. I'm actually not, but I'm close.
Close.
So at any rate, my business career has actually covered 3 different industries, and it has spanned 56 years. And I think this is year 57, and I'm going pretty strong. But I'll start at the beginning. In 1968, when I graduated from high school, I went straight into the United States Marine Corps. And I did that out of a sense of service. I served as both active and reserve duty. This was during the Vietnam War, but I wasn't deployed. I stayed stateside. In 1969, though, after my active duty stint, I became a retailer. See, during high school, I had worked at JCPenney, and then in 1969, when I came home from active duty, I decided I'd try it as a career. I spent 23 years in retailing, and I went from JCPenney into, which is a national chain, as you all know, into department stores such as Marshall Field's, Frederick and Nelson, Foley's down here in Texas, one of the Sanger Harris companies. I worked as a buyer, as a store manager, and as a divisional merchandise manager. So I went up to pretty much of a high spot in management, but I decided to make a change in 1991. I think 23 years kind of burned me out a little on it. So in 1991, I had relocated from Seattle to Miami for retailing. And then as soon as I got to Miami, the company I was working for decided to close down. So I found myself without a career. So
That's happened to me.
So what I did is I looked around and I found the mortgage industry, and I became a mortgage industry professional. And I worked in that industry for another 23 years. So I had 23 as a retailer, 6 as a Marine, 23 as a guy in the mortgage industry. This was with my own business. I started it in 1991. It was successful enough that I was able to take it public in 1998. And then when we went through the dot-com crisis in the early 2000s, I took it private again. I ran that business until 2013 when I passed the bar and became a full-fledged attorney. So here's what you've got. You've got the Marines, you've got 23 years retailing, you've got 23 years as a mortgage industry professional, pretty well known nationally, especially as it related to reverse mortgages, and then law school.
Why law school?
Well, in the later years of my mortgage career, there was more and more mortgage regulation emerging, and a lot of that had to do with the housing crisis meltdown during the 2000s and the fact that Congress had decided that mortgage brokers and small mortgage lenders were responsible in a large way for a rather cavalier handling of customers and of regulations. And I don't necessarily agree that that was true, but it doesn't matter because a fellow named Barney Frank blamed us and Congress believed him. And along came the Dodd-Frank rules, and along came the registration requirements, and along came a whole ton of new rules that a mortgage professional had to comply with or face regulatory wrath. Well, I faced regulatory wrath a couple of times. It was wrongful wrath, but I faced it, and I survived it. But I didn't like it, okay? And the last time that happened to me in the late 2000s, I looked around for an alternative, and I thought, you know, I've got some time on my hands. Maybe I could go to law school and I'd know what these people were doing to me, because they spoke in words I didn't necessarily understand that weren't common use English, and they used concepts and a way of thinking that was foreign to me. You know, I wasn't really a legal thinker. I was a business guy.
Yeah.
So there's a big difference there. So at any rate, I enrolled part-time. It was a 5-year program at Purdue Global Law School in 2005. I was in the 10th class for that school, and that was the first online law school in the United States and maybe the world. I'm not sure about that, but let's just say we were pioneers. There had only been 3 or 4 graduating classes when I enrolled. Concord is a gold standard for online education. It was then, and it remains so today. So it took me 5 years to graduate, running my mortgage company full-time during the daytime and going to school at night. Now, I went to school at night at my house. And generally what I did was I studied law for at least 4 to 5 hours every single night, Monday through Thursday. I took Friday off. I took Saturday off too, really, when I went out on my Harley with my buddies and actually took a breather. But every Sunday I would sit on the back patio and read cases. So I think I went 28 to 30 hours a week for 5 years to understand and learn the law. I graduated in 2011 and I passed the bar in 2013. And that's significant because the California bar is widely considered to be the toughest bar in the United States. When I took it, it was a 3-day, 8 hours session that had a very high, what is called cut score, much higher than the other states in the United States. And if you didn't hit that 1440, I believe it was when I was taking the test, you had to go back and do it again.
Oh my gosh.
So I was proud of that accomplishment. My family was amazed by that accomplishment because, you know, they watched me run the business, do all the studying, and still find time to have family events and ride my bikes and do what I like to do. Okay, so anyway.
Yeah. So why did you do the California bar? Were you living in California at the time?
No, I wasn't, although
Okay.
I had lived in California back in the day.
Yeah.
When I enrolled, I was living in Pembroke Pines, Florida, which is in North Broward County.
Okay.
And that's where my children were going to school, and that's where my house was, and my business was located in Miami Shores, which was close to Pembroke Pines. So I had to find, I was a typical mature student who didn't have the time available to him to get in a car, drive to a campus, sit and listen to a professor who may or may not have known what they were talking about, go home, try to read the books, try to do the papers, and so on and so forth. I didn't have time for that. I was running a company that had 150 employees in 12 states and was successful, and I had to take care of that because I had family responsibilities.
Yeah.
See, many online students fit that profile I just described exactly. But I will say that I was a little bit on the higher end of the age group. When I was a freshman, what they call the 1L, I was 55 years old, and that was unusual. And when I did pass the bar, I was 63 years old, and without a doubt, I was the oldest person in that group. And a couple of years ago, I actually had the experience of being able to go to a Purdue Global graduation and pick up my Juris Doctor degree in person and wear the gown. I had always kind of put that off, thinking it's not important. And as I got a little older, Sherry, I learned that it's really important.
Yeah.
It is very important to celebrate your successes. So I packed up my wife and we went out to LA and we went to a graduation where there were 4,000 Purdue students that were graduating, but only 12 law students. And I was, of course, the only one from 2011. It was a great event. What a great event.
That's one of the things I love about you is that you're constantly learning, constantly wanting to grow. I mean, to go back to law school at 55, that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was considered unusual, and many people said to me that there was no way I would have the stamina or endurance to be able to do something like that, and they were just flat out wrong. And I'll go back to what we started with in this podcast when we talked about the fact that I was a Marine in 1968. What they do is they break us down, and then they brainwash us. And part of what they did when they brainwashed us was they taught us to adapt, improvise, and overcome. And I've done that in everything I've ever done. So age to me has been completely irrelevant. It's totally irrelevant. My energy level is good because my health is good. So it's all related, but it really didn't matter if I was 30 or if I was 70. I was going to do well because I'm a Marine.
Okay, so you finish law school, you go take the bar in California, you end up in Texas, and then what happens? Because there was something that happened about not being admitted to the bar here in Texas?
Right. So I have a California bar card. I'm very proud of that. I come here to Texas in 2014 principally to facilitate a better education for my children. And Sherry and I brought them here, and they got a better education than what they would have gotten in South Florida. No hate for South Florida. It's just a different place, okay? And the education quality here was much better. So we made the decision to move the family here because I didn't want to run the mortgage company anymore, and I had a California bar license, so I had a ticket to a new career. So I started my new career. Let me tell you something about this new career. It's now 11 years later. It's never lost a dime. In fact, I earned back my entire tuition and law school expenses in 7 months. And I now have over 250 clients from 26 states that are on a subscription model with Locke Law and come back to us year after year after year. Our renewal rate is in the 90 percentile range. So I guess you could say after being a retailer and then building a big mortgage business, I created a successful law firm that focused on what I knew best, which was the mortgage industry and mortgage industry compliance. Remember when I said I wanted to know what they were doing to me during the meltdown? Well, now I know. So I used the knowledge that I gained to help other people in the industry.
But were you held back because your bar card is in California versus Texas?
Yeah,
How does that work?
That's why we're here. We're here because what caused me to engage you initially in 2022 was the fact that the Texas Board of Law Examiners, which is the group which is appointed by the Texas Supreme Court, that's the group of lawyers who regulate who can practice law in Texas or not. They have rules that are supposed to be written very clearly, but actually are kind of ambiguous, which is always a problem, okay? So they have rules. And the Texas Board of Law Examiners, one of those rules is that, well, I'll just paraphrase it. It kind of goes like this. We shall never let anyone who's ever gone to law school online ever practice law in the state of Texas under any circumstances. Over. That's pretty much a good paraphrase. So what happened was, when I applied for a Texas bar card in 2021, I went through about a 90-day process of providing tons of paperwork and proof of quality of education and clear moral character and all of that. And they very quickly, in a hearing with me in, I think it was April of 2021, rejected me outright and said essentially, actually, they cut off my microphone when I pointed out that they thought that Purdue University, Purdue Global, they thought it wasn't accredited, and it was, and they were making a very serious effort in that assumption. So I attempted to point that out, and they said, we don't really want to hear from you anymore because you have an online education, and we're not going to let you in. I'm paraphrasing, but that's it. Okay? So that was March of 2021. I engaged a law firm to advise me on how to overcome this absolute bias against virtual education. And working with that law firm and building a small legal team that I was able to guide, okay, we put together a second application which addressed all the questions that they had raised and used to deny me on the first application. We addressed them. We attached extra affidavits. We attached legal opinions. We attached affidavits from the dean of Purdue Global Law School, who happens to be a Harvard graduate. Okay? So we did a lot of things. We gave them a very meaty, very serious second attempt at the application. Well, this time it took them about 6 months to get to the hearing stage. And they evaluated it. It appeared on its face to be a much deeper evaluation, almost as if they took my application seriously this time. But as we got closer and closer to the hearing date, which was in December 2023, they kept changing the bar. They kept moving the target. One time they would have a problem with online education in general. Then they would tell me that they'd sort of decided that that was okay, but because the school was accredited after I graduated, that wasn't okay. Then they decided after they came to some form of acceptance of that fact, then they decided that my business practice wasn't exclusively federal because it wasn't in an area that they described as federal. Very subjective. Have you ever gotten a mortgage? Do you know the laws that are involved in getting a mortgage, and it's all based on federal law?
Yeah, and we all just sign it because we don't want to read any of it and we don't understand any of it.
Everybody knows that. So the fact of the matter is, here I am, a federal mortgage compliance attorney with clients in 26 states, and they don't think that there is any such thing. So they said, well, you know, your practice doesn't qualify. And then, after they decided that maybe I did have a federal practice, that because I still had some clients in California where I am licensed, they decided that that made it not exclusively federal, so that probably disqualified me. Now, you really have to think about the logic there. I have a license from California, and I was dealing with some California clients virtually, just like the way I went to school, and they had a problem with that. So at any rate, we showed up for the hearing in October of 2023.
So this has been going on now for 2 years.
3 years.
Yeah.
It had actually been going on for 3 solid years. So here we are. We're at the first hearing of the second application in October of 2023, and we have a fairly decent meeting with the Texas Board of Law Examiners. But there's something I've got to tell you because I think you'll find this to be an amazing statistic or fact. Let's call it a fact. This is an important thing, getting a bar license. It's an important thing to be able to prove your qualifications and to be able to prove the educational rigor of what you know, correct?
Yeah.
Then why would they give you 4 minutes to speak? Now, I mean, I'm being serious. I'm not being facetious. They give you 4 minutes to speak, and they time you because they don't really, I don't believe that many times they really care what you're saying. That's what's been demonstrated in my case. But at any rate, here we were in October, and they appeared to have agreed with the idea of online education, and they were hung up on whether or not my practice was exclusively federal. So they said, we're going to do a little more research, so we want to reschedule you for December of 2023, to which I said, fine, after my 4 minutes, of course. So December rolled around. I went back to Austin with my legal team to appear again before the Texas Board of Law Examiners. And this is kind of amazing, but we started to make our presentation, and we were stopped and we were told that they had kind of changed their mind about online education. So we went back to where we were in 2021, and they sort of said that they still didn't think, that my practice was exclusively federal. And that was the gist and the tone and the flavor of that second hearing. Before I got out of the building, I had received an email rejecting me for the second time. And this time, the email threw every rule they possibly could at me. In other words, they threw the kitchen sink at me instead of just focusing on online or whatever. Now, you've got to think about this. I'll take you back a little further, and this is important background because we started this whole thing, and we're sitting here today because this was patently unfair and was totally illogical. And the reality is I knew that there were other students and other lawyers in the United States that had gone through the exact same thing I did, but didn't have the knowledge that I had or the experience of how to overcome it.
Okay, so now you've been rejected twice.
Right.
Right? And now what do you do?
Think about what you just said there. I've been rejected twice. I have 10 years of practice. I've got 250 clients in 26 states and a perfect record. Think about that, okay? But yes, I've been rejected twice. Well, I knew that to apply a third time would be futile because the bias was so strong. This is kind of a Star Wars story. This is like the Dark Force. It was so strong that there was nothing that logic or facts or adjusting your thinking to contemporary methods of delivery of educational systems and so on and so forth was going to change. They just flat out didn't like online education.
Which is interesting because so now we're in 2023,
Yes.
right? Early 2024.
Right.
COVID had come and gone, and everyone, all the law schools, all the colleges, all the high schools, all the schools went online, right?
I am so glad you brought that up.
What was happening to all of those folks? So now you've got people who, let's say you started law school in 2000, you got one semester, of school, but the rest is going to be online. What's going to happen to them?
Well, for some reason or another, and mostly because of the over-reliance on the part of most state bars on the American Bar Association, if the American Bar Association took an American Bar Association approved law school and said, we'll allow you to have 2 semesters or 4 semesters of online education because of COVID, and we won't hold that against you, every single state just lined up and said, okay, great, no problem. Okay? But a school like Purdue Global Law School is not an ABA-approved law school. Because, see, Purdue Global Law School, when it was acquired by Purdue, was a for-profit law school, and the ABA represents not-for-profit or state institutions. So there's a big difference there in the way that the rules are being applied.
But if you look at a school like Harvard, aren't they for-profit?
Well, I believe they are, yeah. It's really a distinction that doesn't really carry much weight anymore, okay?
Yeah.
Because the real quality isn't whether or not the institution is making profit or losing money. The real criteria here is what is the quality of the legal education. That's the true point. What is the quality of the legal education? Let me come a little bit forward for just a second since I just asked that question. What about the quality of the legal education? I just want to point out to you that in the last year alone, since we started this venture, there have been 3 separate state Supreme Courts, Utah, Indiana, and now Texas, that have agreed that online education can be as high a quality or higher quality than a traditional legal education. And to prove that even further, if you were to look at the pass rates on the typical bar exam, you're going to see numbers for ABA schools, the almighty ABA, okay? ABA schools that work to ABA standards, you will see pass rates of anywhere from the high 40s, like 47%, 48%, to maybe the high 50s, okay, 55 to 58%. Do you know that Purdue Global Law School was able to sit its graduates for the Indiana bar just a couple of months ago and had a 100% pass rate?
Wow.
Just Google it. You'll find it. You can read all about it. So the fact of the matter is the Indiana ABA pass rate was in the 50s. But my school, everybody passed. What is going on here? The bias. The bias is strong. So that's why I go back to that particular comment.
So you've been rejected twice.
Right.
Now what happens?
Well, I decide that what I've got to do, part of the state of Texas's argument, the Texas Board of Law Examiners, part of their argument was that they absolutely could not be appealed. Now, I want you to listen to this again, okay? Think about, is this logical, and does this sound fair or unfair? They can make a decision, and nobody supervises them, so therefore their decisions are final. And unless the decision has to do with your moral character, which would be drug addiction, criminal records, some pretty serious stuff of which I have none, okay? So the reality of it is, the way their system is set up, they believed that they were absolutely in an ivory tower and could not be challenged. And I just couldn't accept that. I absolutely couldn't accept that. So what I did was I assembled a legal team. It was principally the same team I had that took me through the second application, but this time we had to come up with a mechanism because there apparently was no mechanism in the eyes of the Texas Board of Law Examiners. We couldn't go into the appeals court because they told us there was no right to appeal, okay? So what do? Do you just go home? Well, let me tell you what they told me to do. The Texas Board of Law Examiners actually told me that if I would go back to law school at the age of 72 and attend for another 4 years, get a second Juris Doctor degree, that they'd let me in. Yeah, this is unbelievable, isn't it? This is an incredible story. So the fact of the matter is, we said, well, how are we going to get this? How are we going to get this resolved? And the only place we're going to get this resolved is with the Texas Supreme Court, because that's where the buck stops. And so what we're going to do is, how do we present it to the Texas Supreme Court? And, we came up with something that was really kind of a unique legal mechanism. I'm going to use a big legal word here, bifurcated. What we did was we decided that we would put a petition for administrative review, which is basically a quasi-appeal, okay? We decided we would put that together, citing all the irregularities in the way I had been handled, especially the ones about the quality of my practice and about the quality of Purdue Global Law School, to put all that to rest once and for all and let the Supreme Court read the facts and then make a ruling, okay? But then I thought, well, they might not want to do that, because what if it's right and I can't appeal? Then I needed another legal mechanism that might be usable. And there's a legal mechanism called a writ of mandamus. That's an order. That's a legal order. So what I did was I did a petition for administrative review, or in the alternative, a writ of mandamus. Now, the petition for administrative review meant that the Texas Supreme Court would look at the facts and decide if I'd been treated fairly. They did. And they didn't like what they saw, resulting in an order from the Texas Supreme Court dated May the 6th, 2025, that said, it's Order 25-9024, I believe. If you'd like a copy of it, contact me. What it said was, we've looked at the facts of the case. We've looked at Mr. Locke's practice. We've looked at his record, and we believe he has shown good cause to be waived in to the State Bar of Texas with no further ado. Okay.
Woo.
Well, I think that's a win.
Yeah.
But my legal mechanism said petition or writ. So now they've got this writ hanging out there, and they've got to do something with it. So what they did was, if you see a denial of the writ of mandamus, don't believe that my case was denied, because that's not what happened. They were disposing with the writ in a procedural manner, because you can't have loose ends on a legal case. All right? Does that make sense?
So it kind of sounds like you won.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I got a whole lot of congratulatory emails from the virtual community, the thousands of people that follow us on LinkedIn and the students from Purdue Global Law School. And as a matter of fact, Dean Martin Pritikin from Purdue Global Law School, an outstanding man, a great legal scholar, and I am so proud to call him my friend. He actually posted on LinkedIn that he was so proud of me that at 74, after fighting this battle for 4 years, when I don't have tons of time, okay, at 74, after fighting this battle for 4 years, we clearly won. So now, does the fact that we prevailed affect every student automatically? Well, that depends. It depends on whether you're trying to get into the Texas bar, or you're trying to get into maybe the Tennessee bar or the Wyoming bar or something like that. Because in states other than Texas, what happened with me is definitely persuasive. And what I mean by that is, I mean that a student who's having a problem with bar acceptance can submit what happened to me, and lawyers and judges will generally look at that and they'll say, well, they found a good reason. Maybe we should look a little closer. And the playing field levels itself out a little, okay? But here in Texas, the Texas Supreme Court is presently engaged in a complete review of these same rules that caused this problem. I'm actually kind of proud of that, because in April, they ordered the Texas, when I say they, I mean the Texas Supreme Court, ordered the Texas Board of Law Examiners to go out to the public and to the legal community and to ask for comments about the existing rules for admission. Well, isn't that a coincidence? Just happens to be timed within 30 days of when they ordered the TBLE to waive me into the bar. Okay, so they've given the legal community, the TBLE, per the Texas Supreme Court, has given the legal community until July 1st to post their comments. There are some tremendous comments that have been posted.
And those are all public, so people can
Yes,
go read those?
They're going to be public. They're going to be public after July 1st. And then the Supreme Court will decide, are they going to change the rules? Well, the comments are focused on whether online education can be a high-quality form of education, and does it solve a delivery system problem that we have all over the country and in Texas, and if so, why not? And then they ask another very interesting question. They ask if most lawyers find the ABA to be relevant. And I thought that was really something, because the Texas Board of Law Examiners relies very heavily on the ABA. And you know what? We have our own rules of professional conduct in California, and we have rules of professional conduct here in Texas and the other 48 states. And those rules of professional conduct almost always mirror exactly what the ABA uses. So why do you need two sets of rules of professional conduct? I just don't see that.
I don't either.
So I can understand what the Texas Supreme Court is doing, and I applaud them. They're questioning things that haven't been questioned, like online education, like the relevancy of the ABA. I just think this is fantastic. I am so proud that my legal team is part of this upheaval and revolution that's going on in how online education is being viewed by these regulatory agencies.
So where does your case stand now? Have you been admitted, or because it's only been, as of the recording of this, so today is, let's see, June 11th when we're recording this.
Right.
This episode is going to come out next week. But if someone's listening to this down the road, where are you as of now?
Well, here's where I am, and you shouldn't find this to be any big surprise. I'm just plodding along at the pace of a sulcata tortoise.
What is a sulcata tortoise?
Working towards an eventual admission into the Texas bar. But, see, you would think application one, supposed to have been fully vetted. They said in some of the discovery documents that I got from the Texas Board of Law Examiners, they had fully vetted me, but it really didn't matter because it was online, so I'm not getting in. So then I do the second application, tons of information. We go through all those arguments in those two different hearings where the arguments are all based on, do I have a legitimate practice? Am I a real lawyer? I mean, this is really something, okay? And they spend all that time on it. And you would think that for 4 years, don't you think that they would have looked at the moral character situation here, and they would have said, well, you know what? If we really don't want Nelson Locke to practice in Texas, the easiest way to solve that problem is to find out that he's some kind of dirtbag. Only problem is I'm not. And back in 2021, I provided statements from the state of California about a clear record, about a clear disciplinary record, about a zero record of customer complaints, consumer complaints, and so on and so forth. Then I did the same thing in 2023. Well, you know, when the Texas Supreme Court ordered them to waive me in on May the 6th, almost immediately that same day, I got an email from them telling me that I needed to get a new statement of moral character from California, and it has to have a full complaint check, and they want it to go all the way back to when I became a lawyer in 2013. Okay, well, I did it. It took me a day to do it. I got it. I submitted it. And all I have heard from that point forward is crickets. So here we are on June 11th. 5 weeks have gone by after making me wait for 4 years as I worked through the process. Now another 5 weeks have gone by, and all I hear are crickets.
So is there a deadline? Did the Supreme Court set a deadline?
Generally, what they do is they respect the agency or they respect the attorneys that are filing with the Supreme Court. And we use phrases in the law like reasonable. Reasonable efforts, reasonable timing, good faith, and all of those kinds of things. So the last part of this, good faith, is the part that I find myself questioning. I really don't understand how, since I complied on May the 7th, and I have no skeletons in my closet anywhere, I don't understand why none of the personal references I proposed to the state of Texas, including a judge, 3 very influential attorneys, and business clients of my law firm. I don't understand why none of them have been contacted. Why would that be?
Because the Supreme Court said to do it in a reasonable amount of time.
Well, the Supreme Court implied they wanted it done. Just move on. Move on. Mr. Locke is qualified. Move on. Well,
Get it done.
The Texas Board of Law Examiners' general rule of what to expect when you're applying for a bar admission in this state implies that a moral character investigation could take up to 9 months. Now, that's okay. Theoretically, they already looked at me 2 times prior to this, and now this was the 3rd time. I would just think, trying to be logical, that maybe there would be some urgency here. Because let's face it, I'm going to say it again. I'm 74 years old. I started this 4 years ago. Do I need to expound on that? You know, is this bar ticket going to be awarded to me posthumously? I mean, you know, give me a break. Be reasonable. Anyway, I don't have a feeling about how long this is going to take. I have a feeling of how long it should have taken. I should have already been contacted, and I should have already been told that I would be admitted, and I should have already been able to schedule with a friend of mine who is a judge a swearing in. So let's just say that we want to be reasonable. I think I would be extremely reasonable if I waited till the end of June. But you know, if I haven't heard anything by the end of June, I'm going to begin to believe that there's some bad faith working here. So I don't know what else to say about that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so obviously it's all going to go through, hopefully. If not, we'll definitely have another conversation about
unless
it.
I was walking in my sleep and did something I don't remember, the fact of the matter is, this should be okay.
This should be okay.
Right.
So I know you're so passionate about this. Do you see this as part of the future of your firm, as helping
yes.
other students who are in the same challenge? I mean, I know mortgage is your thing, but...
Well, no, I think you're bringing up a really good point. Like, what can I do with this? If I have a Texas bar card, what can I do to help the consumers of Texas, just like I help the consumers of California, and like I help the federal consumers and federal companies that I have all over the United States, okay? So what could I do? Well, first of all, I can expand what I do to educate and assist Texas mortgage companies. And you can take this statement to the bank. I look at all these ads I see in the state of Texas, and I look at the way the state of Texas enforces some of its own compliance rules regarding the mortgage industry, and it's not at the highest level that will protect the consumer, which is what the intent is, okay? And you can tell this. It's very simple function to determine if somebody takes compliance seriously or not. Anytime you see an ad from any mortgage company or mortgage broker, look to see if you see the NMLS identifier number. Because that, according to the SAFE Act, is the beginning point of demonstrating that you comply. Because the NMLS record would let a consumer see all about your background. But if you don't disclose that number, how are they going to know all about your background? So the bottom line is that's like a starting point. So I decided, yes, I could expand my compliance business to include Texas mortgage companies and Texas mortgage brokers. But I also decided that I know for a fact from discovery that there have been many students and other attorneys who have alternative forms of education, such as online, who have run into this same type of administrative wall that I ran into with Texas. And not everybody has the desire or the ability to come up with a strategy to answer and defeat the objections that are raised when they don't have a rational basis to be raised in the first place. I have that skill. This has certainly been proven by the fact that the Texas Supreme Court has issued Rule 25-2094 and said, waive them in. I would think that that would settle that question. So if I have that experience, and there are people out there who want to practice law in Texas who have alternative form of legal education, because Purdue Global certainly doesn't have a monopoly on online education, there are many online law schools now, and many of them are very good. Some of them are not. But that's a function for the respective state governments to address, wouldn't you think? I mean, they could evaluate the law schools and decide good or bad. just like Indiana decided Purdue Global Law School was great, and then we thanked them with a 100% bar passage rate. I mean, there you go. That's a fact, okay? So, yes, I want to help those people. I think that students, law students that run into this, it's just unfair. It shouldn't happen. And I have some ability here to be of assistance, and I think I will do that.
So what advice would you give to any students who are coming out of an online law school right now? Because there's a lot of them, right?
Yeah, there are. The best way to address that would just be to say that when I talk to a lot of them and when I read their posts and when they send me their emails, and I get a lot of email from these people, they all seem to be uncertain and unsure and doubtful and questioning, and it's almost a self-esteem issue. Let's look at it that way. It's almost like, well, if I had gone to Harvard, nobody would object. But I've gone to ABC online law school. I've got the same Juris Doctor degree. I took that state's bar and passed, but it's just not good enough for Texas. Oh, woe is me. Well, they don't need to think that way, first of all. I think what they have to do is they have to become confident that if they've got a JD degree and they've passed a bar, or if they've just got a JD degree and it was from an accredited law school in the state where they lived or where they decided to go, the fact of the matter is they should have a shot at being able to get into a bar. And I'm going to help those people. I think that's important.
Do you think that this is going to apply to other industries that are regulated?
Oh, that's an excellent question. You know, it's interesting, Sherry, and I have to say this, I don't want people that have an online education from other industries to think that this is any kind of elitism on my part. It's not. But the legal industry is regulated to a much higher standard, kind of like the medical industry, and it's because we can do tremendous harm to people. We can wreck people's lives with the wish of a pen. Gee, I remember hearing that in a political conversation recently. The reality of it is we can do bad things. We can also do really good things. But because some of us will do those bad things, we've got to have a higher standard that we're held to. So I think that what this is going to do is going to be extremely helpful to law students, or to other lawyers who want to practice in the state of Texas or in any other state, because I do believe that Texas or outside of Texas, the Texas Supreme Court's decision about Nelson Locke is persuasive.
Yeah.
And that's going to be usable. Now, is that persuasive if you're trying to get a CPA degree based on an online education? Maybe. Maybe. Or how about some other form of medical degree that isn't as intense as perhaps an MD or a surgeon or a neurosurgeon, or something like that? Maybe, maybe it would work. But I do think that the legal education is always held to a higher standard. And it's because of the harm we could do if we were so inclined, which I am certainly not.
What an incredible story.
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it?
Will you come back and keep us posted? Tell us what's next?
Yeah, and I'd like to also tell your listeners and viewers, what I would like them to do is I'd like them to reach out to me and let me know if they have any issues or questions about what they see in the content of this podcast. I'd like to be able to talk to them. I have the time to do that, and I'd be happy to do that. And all they have to do is get to me at the email address that's on my website, which is locklaw.us. At locklaw.us, there's a blog there, too, if you're in the mortgage industry. Get compliant if you happen to be in the mortgage industry. I'm going to be looking at you.
And it's Locke law.
Yes, that is correct. It is locklaw.us, like John Locke. There you go.
Excellent. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Sherry.